you ready for this? It's showtime. Lights, fans, action. Oh yeah, we've got action. Faster, tougher, more ferocious. There's nothing like League. This is the Betfred Super League.
Got me here. It took a big chunk out of me. Bleeding. It's bleeding. Oh no, it's bleeding. The thing just ripped my ear off. What do you think?
Welcome along to a very special edition of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast. As always, our thanks to Betfred for their support in bringing this to you each and every week. Now, it's not often that I get to sit down and talk to one of the most influential and successful club owners in the game. But this week, I'm delighted to say that the St Helens Chairman, Eamonn McManus, has given up his time to sit down with me and talk about all things rugby league. And we're here at the Totally Wicked Stadium to do just that. So lots to talk about, but let's start, as Stevo and I usually do, with a look at the action from last weekend. I think we agree, Eamonn, that at the very top of the tree in this sport, the game's in pretty good shape.
It is. I think certainly 5 rounds gone so far, and there's been some amazing games, starting with the opener. Who would ever think 1-0 after extra time in a Super League game, but an absorbing encounter, that Wigan and Lee game. And there's been a number. Each weekend there's 2 or 3 quite incredible fixtures. I thought our game against Warrington, even though we came out at the wrong end at the end of it, was a great game for both sets of supporters and for rugby league fans. And that seems to be happening each weekend at the moment. My own view on that is that there's a couple of sides that have really improved over the last 2 to 3 years, Hull KR and Lee in particular. Leeds are getting back towards where they can and should be. So there is genuine and real competition. So there's very few foregone conclusions, but the quality is as high as it's ever been at this point in time.
Very much so. And of course, the fact that Friday night Saints Warrington was such a great game in a turbulent time for the sport, and we'll come on to that shortly. Do you take any comfort from the fact that it was such a good game, such a great advert for the sport, even though you lost by a couple of points?
I do. I mean, it wasn't just the game itself, but the atmosphere within the ground, the pre-match entertainment, the whole evening was a great evening. And there wouldn't be a single person that came to that ground, I would hope, that doesn't want to come back. And more importantly, I think on TV it came across very, very well indeed, and that's the acid test, isn't it?
Super game. It was a super game, it really was. March the 29th, this weekend, is the 29th birthday of the Super League.
Well,
they're going to have their 5,000th game this weekend in the Super League.
Well,
now, when you look back over those 30 years, is the game as good these days as it was way back then?
The game, as in the spectacle on the field.
Yes. What happens out there?
Yeah, I would say it's changed, as has every sport. It's like saying, is Premier League football as good today as it was in 1996? The answer is it evolves. Is it as entertaining? I think possibly not. And we really, as a sport, need to review, rather than just being a slave to what is and always has been, the rules, the environment in which you play, and certainly more emphasis needs to go on to what do spectators want to watch, what does frustrate them, what's unnecessary, what can be done to simplify the game. To produce a spectacle. People always say it's got to be faster, it's got to be whatever. But I think the view of fans, certainly over the last 2 to 3 years, is that the game maybe become a little more too structured, a little too predictable, complicated where it need not be. I mean, the beauty of the sport, and that's why rugby league started, was that very straightforward rules, as is soccer. Soccer is the most popular sport in the world. One of the main reasons is it's easy to understand. It's easy to understand, it's easy to play, and it's good on the eye. So I think we've overcomplicated certain areas, and we need to get back to the simplicity of the game. But is it better? Listen, we're old men.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
we like everything as it was in years gone by.
Oh, I think it's brilliant. I do.
But it's still a fantastic game.
It is.
It is a fantastic game that, again, you and I know that its biggest weakness is it's never had in this country the prominence that it merits. But you've got to work for that, haven't you? It doesn't just naturally happen. You can't blame it on history. You can't blame it on prejudice. You just got to get on with it and change that.
And it doesn't just walk through the door. But on the field, I think when it's played properly, as it has been in, as you say, 3 or 4 matches each and every week this year, it's brilliant to watch. You wouldn't want to miss it. And you look back over the 29 years and the 5,000 games. We've had the switch to summer. We've had the introduction of the video referee, which led the way for VAR and everything else. And we've had the grand final. You know, it's just the change has been incredible and
pioneering change.
Very much so. I mean, captain's challenge. I'm not sure.
Well, again, it's the rules. It depends on how you implement them. You don't want 5 minutes of a review on a captain's challenge.
You're getting them.
But we're getting them. Again, I don't want to keep comparing to the NRL, but the NRL is like 30 seconds bump, on you go. And I think it does work there. With us, it's kind of captain's challenge, and then 2 minutes before the video footage comes up, and then another 5 minutes whilst it's being reviewed, and way too disruptive to the game at this point in time. But look, we've just introduced it. We ain't, it'd be wrong to change it during the course of a season. Let's see how it evolves, but it's got to be speeded up at the very least.
Indeed. Well, we're talking very positively, and so we should. But the elephant in the room is that the game at the moment, at the very top of the sport, the running of the sport, and even dare I mention the word Salford, we have our problems. And there's a lot of sympathy for Salford as a club. Do you share that sympathy? Because I don't think it's been handled, this business, and Stevo shares this view, it's not been handled very well.
I have sympathy for Salford because I've always had a soft spot for Salford all my life. I remember the great days of David Watkins and Paul Charlton and the likes, and they've got a passionate set of supporters, and we need that team in Manchester, and they've played a great brand of rugby in recent years, haven't they? But the financial, there's 2 ways of looking at this. Perversely, Salford are the best performing team in Super League financially. Their losses are the lowest. The reality is...
Not their profit is the lowest, their losses.
Their losses are the lowest, right? But they are different to other clubs in that they have no individual to underpin and fund those losses. Other clubs have. So you can't criticise them for the financial performance.
They've overperformed, is what you're saying.
They've overperformed financially. They've underperformed less than others. But there is no person to absorb those losses, and that's why they've got to work. They've got through it in recent years by having fundraisings with fans, by selling key players, etc. And they've done a great job in terms of keeping the club going. But they were always going to hit that wall unless they brought an investor in, or unless the game as a whole improved financially, whereby we all benefited from it. So you can say that this was going to happen, and they've been in special measures for over a year. So I have sympathy with their fighting spirit, and in their position, would anybody else do anything different? But they should not have been having those levels of losses, certainly over the last year, signing new players when there was no prospect of meeting their liabilities. And it was just a very high-risk strategy that they had to get an investor in order to survive, but didn't take the necessary steps to reduce their liability beforehand, just in case it didn't.
Well, allegedly they've got an investor, but he's been in and out of bed with them for about the past 6 months.
Yeah.
And the people at the top of the game, the powers that be, have been silent. We don't know
they've been
what's going on.
Silent, and also, more importantly, it has been in special measures. So they've been aware of the situation for 15 months. So how is this allowed to get to the position that it has? It is complex, and I've got to be careful what I say because I've just joined the board of RL Commercial, so I have duties of confidentiality. But there has been a silence, and I think the general feel is that this could and should have been handled better than it has been, to put it mildly.
Is this the reason, the bottom line, the reason why the changes at the top of the RFL, the departure of Simon Johnson, his other 2 or 3 directors, ladies who have gone with him, is this the fundamental reason why all that's happened?
There's been an accumulation of reasons, and I wouldn't pinpoint Salford as one, but I think there's been dissatisfaction in certain areas about Salford, but there's been quite a number of areas. But I think the real reason, if you ask around the clubs, and this is uniform, and it's not just Super League, this is the game of rugby league, its clubs, the members, is the financial performance of the game. Over the last 4 years, there's been a £30 million per year negative turnaround in its financial performance, which equates to nearly £2.5 to £3 million per club, which is a non-sustainable position. And from my own viewpoint, and I've been saying it privately, but now that it's in the public domain, I think one of the main frustrations is the lack of recognition, empathy, and ideas coming out of the RFL to work with us to improve the position. I'm not saying it's their fault at all. A lot of it is force of circumstance. But there needs to be more recognition and more collaboration with us to improve the position. We all know, and I've said this on a number of occasions, the worst business model in British professional sport is club rugby union, whereby the clubs lose between £3 to £8 million each year on year. Now that resulted eventually in the collapse of 3 clubs in the same season. There's a 4th one that's on the precipice. And we've gone from being a game that has always cut its cloth, regardless of its financial position, we've adapted to it. And over the last 4 years, we've not. We're spending more than we have, which you can do to a degree, but not to the degree and not year on year that we have. So it's that degree of, I think that's the underlying reasons for that is the destruction of shareholder value, making it a less investable proposition. And a game that is totally dependent on the charitable donations, because that's what they are, of owners of clubs. It's not a situation that should have ever happened, or if it did happen, it should have been addressed pretty quickly.
I think you issued a statement over the weekend, and you were pretty hard-hitting in that statement.
Yeah.
And let me get it right. You said, you clearly seek to be the best governed, bankrupt sport in the world, and that immediate change and improvement is critical.
Yep.
Now, you've got that immediate change at the top of the game at the RFL. Is this a...
okay. We'll qualify that.
Okay, go on.
Well, we have. I mean, the board of directors... Listen, everybody wanted to do this privately and discreetly. If there's going to be change, these things should happen behind closed doors. We as clubs uniformly did not want this to come into the public domain, but it has, unfortunately, and now needs to be addressed.
Is it a coup by the clubs like Saints, Wigan, Warrington, Leeds?
Quite the opposite. This is because it's the entire game. This is the Rugby League Council. There are 52 members of the Rugby League Council, so it's not a coup in any way. We don't want to spend time running the game. Quite the opposite. We want to spend time running our clubs, but we want to be operating in an environment, particularly a financial environment, where that is viable. At the moment, it isn't. So changes have to be made. Otherwise, we're finished.
Do you want to be a completely independently run body by your own board of directors?
This is what we said. We as clubs don't want vested interest. We don't want to give. Ultimately, this is the way we want it. So, what we actually then suggested, and we thought was happening, but not necessarily at this point in time, was that let's set up an independent review committee. Firstly, given the mass resignations of the existing board, we needed someone in there quickly who knows the game, who can hit the ground running, who's hands-on, and that's why Nigel Wood was an acceptable proposition, because he has the experience, he has the track record, and as an interim chairman, and this is what he was being appointed to do as an interim chairman, and to conduct a strategic review. And he chose 4 very eminent people indeed. It was a good body. It was Lord Jonathan Kane, who's Under Secretary for Northern Ireland and a Leeds fan all his life, knows the game and has done reviews for us before. A guy called Dermot Power, who was the head of the most successful corporate restructuring insolvency practice in the north of England. Abi Okoku, who we all know, and head of the Players Association for years, who's been underrepresented in our game to get player input into it. And Emma Rosewarne, who was in the RFL for 20 years, and what Emma doesn't know is not worth knowing. So he put together a body that will review the game, but particularly governance structures as to what works and what doesn't. Because, we've got to be honest, the current structure isn't working, and there's a lot of frustrations with it. So rather than try and patch it up, let's look to a clean slate approach, where we should be, how we should get there, but let people who are not prejudiced by individual club views do it, and present the report to us. And by to us, I mean all clubs, all council members, with a view to voting on and adopting it or not. So that's what was proposed. But we've hit a wall again here in that that was all accepted by the RFL. Resolutions were going to be passed to do so. They undertook to implement those resolutions, and one of the resolutions was no new directors until this review is completed in July and adopted. And the last executive act of the 2 directors that were still in place was to appoint 6 new directors. Right. So that's the new board. So we've reached probably a bigger impasse as of today as to where we go.
But the bottom line is basically you as an owner and all the other owners and chairman, you want to run your own clubs. Game, your own clubs, uncluttered. You don't want to.
We don't want to run the game. We absolutely do not want to.
You don't want to be in charge of referee appointments. And
no,
all
well,
that
you can't be. You cannot be.
Well, I know you might put in if you did.
Tempted on occasions, but no. I mean, there has to be independence to a degree, but there has to be accountability also. What we want is a game that financially is thriving and is run by competent people at the top that understand rugby league, understand finance and understand commerce. It's not a big ask, to be honest, because there are quite a few people of that vein. So, we're saying it's a crisis. Listen, every sport, every few years undergoes some sort of crisis. It's just a pity that it's in the public domain. We didn't want this.
It's bound to happen, though, isn't it?
No,
because, well, rugby league's a leaking colander. You know that better than I do.
Yeah, but this is more than leaking.
Yeah,
this is now, that's out there, and it's become unnecessarily antagonistic. But there is a resolution, and but the clubs are. It's overwhelming and it's unified. And as I say, this isn't just a few powerful Super League clubs. This is widespread amongst all clubs and all members. I mean, it's not just clubs. You've got your community game, the forces, universities, and the likes. All of these people.
The lot.
These people, all these representatives have to vote and will vote.
That's very interesting that it is a whole game review.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. I mean, the one thing that I have read and seen and listened to on social media is the name Nigel Wood.
Yeah.
People rugby league people have an opinion about everything. You well know that.
Yep.
You know, good, bad, and indifferent.
Yeah.
People seem to think, well, you got rid of him in 2018. How come in 2025 Nigel Wood is suddenly the messiah to come back and run the game? Wasn't IMG supposed to be doing this?
Well, one thing though, we didn't get rid of him. What happened was in 2018, Super League separated from the RFL or from the structure that pertained at the time. Therefore, Nigel was made redundant as a result of that exercise and actually became chair of the International Rugby League. So
the public perception is you got shut of him.
Yeah, but that's just patently not correct. It's patently not correct, and there's this big fuss that he got a severance payment. Well, he didn't ask for it. You know,
you get made redundant. You get one anyway, don't you?
Absolutely,
by law, isn't it?
That was a a contractual entitlement. He isn't going to turn it down. I would say that what he's volunteered to do now for the good of the game, he's doing for free, right? That's not getting any publicity.
It is now.
It is now. Thank goodness. He's doing it for free because he wants to see the game rehabilitate and prosper, as do the people around him. But it's when Nigel's name was suggested. Listen, there's no one had more arguments than me with Nigel during his tenure. But his track record was quite incredible. You know, he negotiated 4 broadcast deals during that period. Each one doubled, and the last one was in excess of £40 million, from which we all benefited. Each year the RFL was break even or profitable. Each year club distributions went up. Now, I know it was a different era, but he has that track record. More importantly, he has that knowledge and experience. So we want someone for an interim period to stabilise the game who can put the feet under the table right away and get on with the job. Is there anybody else? If there is, step forward, because no one has. And I'll be quite open on this. There's clearly been an orchestrated campaign to damage his name.
Very much so.
I really think it's utterly appalling. And please step forward, whoever it is, and say why. Because it's just unfair on him as a person, and it's very unfair on our game that is not benefiting from this at all.
I've spoken to Nigel a number of times, not recently, it must be said, because of course, you know, I'm out of the game and he was at Bradford, so there we go. But he always used to say to me, I look at myself in the mirror and I think to myself, well, you've done okay today. You have got the future and the game at heart. Yeah. So you can't take that away from him.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are people, and a letter is in circulation that says this move to re-govern or whatever it is, the game is misogynistic, is led by an old boys club, it's all the things that it shouldn't be. Now, what do you say to that?
I'm aware of some of these letters, and as far as I'm seeing, that they're anonymous. No factual evidence, no facts, no evidence. So how can we deal with it? As I say, I'm recently joined the board of RL Commercial, and I can see no trace of that. Not only are we not a misogynistic sport, we had an entire board of directors that were ladies who've resigned of their own accord, but these accusations of misogyny, which in my view don't seem to exist, happened under their watch. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense, to be quite candid. I hope I'm not being too obvious here. But listen, if there is any element, we'll root it out and we'll deal with it.
Good.
Yeah, it will be dealt with, absolutely. But we don't know what to deal with because we've not been presented with anything.
No. Where's IMG in all this, Eamonn? Where are they?
Well,
you've paid them a fortune, and it appears, and Stevo and I go on about this every week, they're doing nothing. IMG have done and are doing nothing for the game. Is that fair?
No.
I didn't expect you to say yes.
Well, firstly, you say they've been paid a fortune. For the first 2.5 years, the deal was that they work for free. And
they've only been involved for
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's only just now that we're starting to pay them for defined services under the terms of the contract. So the first 3 years was a strategic review, a rebranding, digital and the likes. And my own view is that they unfortunately have got completely absorbed in grading. Whether you think that's the right system or the wrong system, it's a very time-consuming and costly system. It needs an awful lot of input from both sides, both from the centre and from the clubs, and employing people to do so, and very, very time-consuming. So that has absorbed a lot of their time. In the defence, there is no working capital in the game. To do things, you need money. At this point in time, it's not really there. Their strength, and the reason why I was favourably disposed to them when first contracted is they're an international sports marketing agency par excellence and world renowned as to doing so, but we're not actually using them on the marketing and sponsorship and events management side. So I think we probably need to look at, and I think they'll be open-minded themselves as to, what their principal services are for the payments that we make, and should we change what we're doing. But yeah, on the surface, you're right. In reality, things have been done. Whether the cost of doing them has resulted in the benefit that we'd hoped is another matter entirely. And if it's not working, then it's two sensible, grown-up professional parties that will get together and redesign it.
Yeah, that's reassuring that there are things going on that we don't know about underneath the surface, and hopefully things will be okay. I would imagine that you have an idea of who you want to run the game moving forward, independent of all that sort of business. There's a guy who's about to leave a major club at the end of the year, who Stevo and I have always said should be really, really involved in running of the game. Your pal Gary Hetherington. Would you like to make an appeal to Gary to come and help out at the end of 2025 and sit in the hot seat?
I think Gary,
he's probably had enough.
No. I don't think Gary could get out of bed in the morning without knowing that he's going to spend the whole of that day doing rugby league. But I think it's now been announced, hasn't it, that he's looking to London.
Yes.
He's looking to bring investors in there. So
he sounds the perfect fit then for what you want to run the game.
Well, he wants to. Well. He wants to do the London job, doesn't he? Yeah. He wants to do, and that is critical.
Yeah,
that is critical.
Well, there's IMG again. We need a big team in London. The first thing they do at the start of last season is they say you're not going to be in next year. I mean, we all left scratching our heads.
Well, that was again, when there's a grading system. When there's a grading system, there's always unwanted results emanating from it, and that was the big one, London. But underneath that, London needs significant investment.
David Hughes has provided that for many years, Eamonn.
He did, but when I mean significant investment, I mean much bigger investment than David spent tens of millions over the years. But David was a full-time oil trader. He wasn't running the club. So I think Gary's looking to put together a syndicate to invest in it. They need a permanent home. They've been an itinerant club, so they've never actually got a buy-in from the community that they've been playing in over a period. So, one good thing about Gary is he's seen the various cycles at London. He's identified why it's not worked. So I think, he's already announced that he's working on that and putting together an investment syndicate. And
look what he did at Leeds. He inherited a 6 million debt. And he's turned it into what it is now, with Paul Caddick, to be fair.
I mean, he did. He obviously had the advantage of it being a major city, a major economy and the likes, but he ran it very, very sensibly for a long period. So there is a model there. There's a big city model, isn't there? Except Leeds is a rugby league city and London isn't.
It's got about 25 football clubs.
Having spoken to him, he's got some very good ideas. I hope he can put the syndicate together. It's a considerable challenge financially. It's something that you can't do in half measures. It's something that you've got to do full time and with a very significant investment. So let's hope he does that. That's as important in its own right as him being involved in running the game to some degree. And I think Gary will agree that he's too old to run the game.
He's also said to Steve, will you leave me alone and not ask me the question as he does every time he meets him. So I think it's a non-runner.
Yeah, he's even older than I am.
Yeah.
So,
really?
Not many of us, I know. But so yeah, he's that's his project. I think that's his passion. I hope it succeeds.
It has been said over this last weekend on TV that there is seismic change coming to rugby league in the not too distant future.
Yep.
That this seismic change will make 1995, 1996 look like a teddy bear's picnic.
Yep.
Is the seismic change on the way? Do you really believe deep down that this is the moment when the game will eventually take off?
Brian obviously knows things.
I didn't mention him. You have.
Oh, sorry,
Brian Carney. That's no problem. Yeah, he's the only one on TV.
He said it to kind of the whole of the public anyway, so there's no mystery to the identity. Yeah, I heard that, and maybe he knows. Well, it sounds like he does know something that we don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
He can't know more than you, surely.
It seems like that. Yeah. No, I mean it, yeah. Obviously there has to be change. We're looking at change that is within our control. Whether there's other changes that will eventuate due to major investment from overseas into the game, that would be seismic.
You're hinting there maybe this NRL rumour might come to fruition. Peter Vlandis allegedly is very keen to help.
It's not a rumour, it's not alleged, he's stated that.
He wants to take over. The NRL want to take over our game.
Yeah, I think it was as blunt as that, yeah. So
is that going to be good for our game?
Put it this way, I am enthused to participate in conversations, as are all clubs. Is pushing on an open door in that regard, because the NRL would have a huge amount to offer to our game potentially, in terms of financial investment, in terms of best practice, and the likes. But it's our game. Total control is that's the area that would need to be discussed, and obviously it's not being discussed at this point in time. But yeah, the level of management.
Isn't there a danger that we'd lose all our best players? We're already losing a raft of them anyway.
That's where the devil's in the detail,
exactly.
Isn't it? I mean, if it was a case of we being feeder clubs for Australia, which to some extent we are already, but if that's formalised, I personally would be against it.
Good.
For there to be arrangements, anything's open for discussion, but we can't be a feeder competition. To agree informally, we are that vulnerable at the moment because of the differential in pay in the NRL and here. So it is an attraction, and that's been historic. Players have been going to Australia, since I've been watching the game. In the old days, I remember being heartbroken when Tommy Bishop and Cliff Watson and people like that in the 60s went to Australia, Dick Hoddart. So this isn't a recent phenomena at all. But I'm sure that the NRL, if this did evolve, there's no point in them having a partnership or an investment in a sport unless it's highly successful. And to be highly successful, you need a high calibre of player and you need a high calibre of management here. So, a kind of a feeder element to it completely undercuts that, doesn't it? It's a contradiction to it. So, listen, kind of it's a concept at the moment, and my own background is investment banking, and regardless of sport, you've got the NRL, which is highly successful, is cash rich. It's getting near to saturation in Australia in terms of where it can go, how it can reinvest its surplus cash. So what businesses do is they look in new markets for the same business to see if there's anything there that they can invest in, improve, grow, and get a return on their investment, as well as improving the business that they're investing in. And this is kind of the perfect combination, isn't it?
It is.
It's win-win on both sides. But as I say, to my knowledge, there's no detailed discussions going on. It's something that may eventuate, but there's certainly an openness here in our competition and amongst its stakeholders to listen and to discuss.
Eamonn, this has been fascinating. It has been a fantastic interview. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I know you're busy. I know you've got to get away. Last two questions. 29 years old this weekend. Where will we be in the next 29 years?
Well, you and me will be 6 feet under.
Yeah, we'll be watching from above. Yeah.
Well, we are reaching a fork in the road, aren't we? There is no doubting that the game at the moment, as great as it is a spectacle on the field, and it really is as good as we've had for a long, long time, I feel, this year, that its financial position is one of weakness rather than strength. So that has to be addressed. And there's two ways of doing it. One is by way of natural evolution, and we've got to do that anyway. We've got to get better people in to run our sport, and that's something that we're tackling at the moment. Better qualified people in every regard. So that's something that we can do and improve as a result of that, by addressing the weaknesses which are obvious and looking to strengthen them. But that does take time, and time isn't a friend.
No.
But as I say, there may well be investors out there that are strategic in nature and maybe not just limited to the NRL.
So come and join us. That's the message. Come and join us.
Yeah.
You did that. 2000.
I came back to England.
Yeah. And you invested in this club, and look what you have today.
Yeah.
You've had fantastic success on and off the field, even though you're now running a quote bankrupt business.
Yep.
Have you ever had a regret? Ever
No.
looked and thought, I should never have done this?
Probably every morning when I wake up. Listen, it's one of those things, kind of, I did it because, for one reason, passionate St Helens supporter all my life, came back from overseas, there was an opportunity to invest, was the wrong term, donate some money.
Yeah. It must have cost you a fortune.
It does. I mean, I'm lucky I've got a great partner in the club, Mike Coleman, who lives in Singapore, who's a long-term friend. My wife and children and inheritance are not necessarily.
You'd only be paying 40% of it to the government anyway.
Correct.
Yeah,
I do say that to them. Yeah.
But no regrets, really.
Yeah, kind of. Well, it's. I always call it the descent into the maelstrom. It's like being thrown into a washing machine and you can't get out of it. But crikey, have I been a lucky guy. My hometown club, I've been chairman, 8 grand final wins, 14 grand finals, 8 grand final wins, 6 or 7 challenge cups, 3 World Club challenges. Crikey, I'm a very, very fortunate man.
And the game's fortunate to have you, Eamonn, as well.
Possibly.
Yeah,
possibly.
Definitely.
I try to do my bit. Yeah.
You do. It's been, as I say, been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant.
My pleasure,
I've enjoyed every minute
as
of
always.
it. And I'm sure...
Yeah, I'll be back on when the next crisis eventuates.
Let's talk something more than crisis next time you come on. But it's been really, really great. Thank you so much. There we go. That's it for this week. I hope you agree. A really special edition of our podcast. And again, grateful thanks to the St Helens Chairman and owner, Eamonn McManus, for his time in sharing his very forthright views with us. We expect nothing else. We'll be back to normal next week. But for now, from this edition of Eddie and Stevo, the podcast, it's goodbye and thank you for being there.